Welcome to Sisflix, the podcast where we won't judge you for talking through the movie. Sisflix are the movies you laugh at, yearn for, and overanalyze with your girls, significant others, and now us.
We are your hosts,
Paola
and Nadhya, two sisters and designers who discuss chick flicks we hate to love,
tropes we love to hate,
and all of the aesthetic choices in between. Join us as we break down our favorite movies together.
Hey, sister.
Hey, sister.
Happy Springerton.
Yes. Happy Springerton.
Happy spring. It's officially spring. London season would be starting right about now. Did you know that?
Is that
through
true?
The summer. Yeah, it is. From April through July. This is when you would start seeing all of the British aristocrats go from their country home to their London city home to participate in London's society season.
And I think we can all agree that's super duper relatable.
For Regency London, this was when the marriage-minded mamas would debut their daughters in society. So the season ended up also marking like the coming out of high society daughters at debutante balls. And so in London, one of those balls was Queen Charlotte's Ball, which was actually started by King George III in honor of his wife's birthday in May.
Wait, so Queen Charlotte was a Taurus? Because that explains a lot.
Yeah, I have 2 Taurus kids. It does explain a lot. Just as we see take place in Bridgerton, debutantes of high society, meaning, you know, the aristocrats of the time that were part of the court, would be presented to the queen, and that would mark like their official coming out into society and officially being available.
So in the show, they make such a big emphasis on needing to be married within their first season, but it sounds like in reality it would take several seasons for people to get married once they were out in society.
Well, in the show, they emphasize that as like, that's the great success. That's the goal, is to be married on your first season. If you did that, you're like best of the best. Actually, Daphne, in the book, The Duke and I, which is what the first season of Bridgerton is based on, she was on her second or third season when the story takes place.
Which makes more sense. I mean, like, it's not relatable in that we don't do that anymore, but it is more relatable in that she's not the hottest, best, coolest girl that everyone wants immediately.
Well, did you know that the debutante ball in London, like specifically Queen Charlotte's Ball, they were doing it as recently as like the 1970s?
Oh, what the fuck?
Queen Elizabeth was the one to actually like stop supporting it. Once the monarchy stopped supporting it, it kind of just died off.
Huh, wow. Even a broken clock, as they say. So, going by your notes, the Marriage Mart season was the equivalent of today's hot girl summer. Except you come out cuffed and booed up at the end.
That's the goal for sure.
Wild. I don't even think I started dating my husband with the goal of getting married. So, for the aristocrats of London, debutantes were launched into society with a formal introduction to the Queen at Queen Charlotte's Ball, which is how season 1 of Bridgerton begins. And they kind of make a trend, I think, of beginning each season with the launch of another Bridgerton sister being presented to Queen Charlotte.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, season 1, we got Daphne being presented. Season 2 started off with Eloise being presented. And I mean, the Bridgertons are the focus of the Bridgerton series, obviously. And I mean, it sure helps that she has 8 kids whose lives we get to follow along and see them fall in love.
And season 3, there are rumors. I mean, we don't have an official trailer yet, but season 3 is rumored to begin with the presentation of Francesca.
Right.
So Francesca, famously quiet. No one knows fucking anything about Francesca. And they had to recast the actress who plays her because she has significantly more screen time this season. And she was previously played by an actress named Ruby Stokes, who was in like 2 or 3 shows at the same time. And so she wasn't a huge part of Bridgerton seasons 1 and 2. And so I think a lot of people are like barely going to notice that Francesca's a fully different actress. but I think they recast her very well.
They did. I mean, it really looks like just a more grown up version of the Francesca we got to meet in the first 2 seasons of Bridgerton.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the casting made for a perfect transition. And I hear that Francesca's story is pretty spicy. So
Yeah,
we're
I
going to see
haven't
some
read that
drama
book.
taking place. I haven't gotten to Francesca's book yet.
Yeah.
But I am excited to see some of that take place because apparently it brings the drama.
The drama. So
Yes.
let's discuss a little bit of the background of Bridgerton and like how it came to be and what it's based on, because we've already made reference to the Bridgerton book series a handful of times. So if you guys are like super duper fresh, or you've only really seen the Bridgerton show on Netflix like the one time right after it came out and didn't really like look into anything beyond that, and maybe you're a little interested, Bridgerton, the television series, is produced, realized, brought to the screen by the Shondaland production company. So Shonda Rhimes, the producer and writer who's behind Grey's Anatomy, Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, amongst a million other shows probably. Like, she's incredibly prolific. Grey's Anatomy has been on for like 20 fucking years. And Bridgerton is based on a book series that was written by Julia Quinn, the first book of which was released in 2000, called The Duke and I, and that is what the first season is based on. However, I would say that based on is really loose, because based on takes kind of the main plot line, which is between Daphne and her love interest. It takes the characters' names and like kind of more or less their dynamics between each other. But the television series adds so much more color and like roundedness to this story and to this society. And I think the production team behind it really took the opportunity to kind of be like, if we were building Regency era society, what would we make it like? Like, if we were tweaking a bunch of these variables, maintaining kind of like some of the main points of conflict, which is like you have to maintain the rules around sex and the rules around marriage. But if everything else outside of that was variable, what would we bring to the table? And so they made a ton of like really interesting and I think well-developed choices that help the show not only focus on the Bridgerton kids, even though that's like the main point, but focus a lot on building up like secondary and tertiary characters as well. And focuses on a good amount of diversity, even though the show definitely receives, not just the show, but like Shonda Rhimes in general and how she casts her shows receives a lot of criticism, I think. Receives criticism and doesn't, right? So she's praised for how diverse her shows are, but there's criticism in that a lot of times, you know, a character of color will be paired with a white character, or a white...
she loves a biracial couple.
Loves a biracial couple. A main white character will often have a spouse or a romantic partner who's a person of color. So then it's kind of like, are they just there to hold up this white character?
Are they an accessory?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, why aren't characters of color just finding each other as well as biracial couples? But those are like a couple of, I think, very nitpicky points regarding diversity that we get about Shonda Rhimes TV shows. As far as the TV show, Bridgerton season 1 was released on Netflix in December of 2020. So 20 years after the book was originally released. It was a Christmas present to the world. Gifted to us to unwrap by Santa Claus himself on Christmas Day of 2020 on Netflix. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember 2020. I don't blame you if you don't. It was pretty terrible. But I would say 2020 was probably the biggest year for people not gathering for the holidays, just because of everything that was happening with the pandemic at the time, not having any vaccinations yet. Everybody was still pretty deep into lockdown, unless you had a person-facing job. But many of us who were privileged enough to be able to stay home during that time were watching a fuck ton of TV, just combing over the back catalog of Netflix. And Bridgerton came out at the perfect time for that era of consumption.
Oh, for sure. And another thing that I like to add as far as like the timing of Bridgerton is that it came right at a time where I think that people of color were struggling in this country, coming out of the Black Lives Matter movement, not the organization, when it was such a joy to see Black joy and elegance on screen, and such a relief. It felt like a breath of fresh air.
And it's definitely a representation of people of color that we never get. A period drama centering some level of positive Black experience, some level of Black wealth or
Black aristocracy. I mean, it was so refreshing to watch and to see that. And the way everyone of all different races and classifications like were drawn to that, I think says so much. And it was so celebrated. It just felt good to see that. It really did.
like, because unfortunately, I don't think the authors of Julia Quinn, again, is a modern day romance novel author, but I don't think, you know, Jane Austen or the Bronte sisters or authors of the 1800s would be like, yeah, the 1800s were the best and everybody should be nostalgic about them. I don't think anybody would say that. But at a time where we were literally like stuck in our homes, people are getting sick. Unfortunately, as we all know, a bunch of people were falling very ill and passing away, and people were in their grief. It was a terrible time. It was like a fantasy land. Like, especially because they're injecting so many elements that were not contemporaneous to the Regency era. It's literally a fantasy princess land where it's like your conflicts feel so stupid to me. And I love that. I love that for us all.
But at the same time, also felt so relevant and tangible, right? Because of what we see women going through in the society. And as we all know, we just discussed this in our last episode. We talked about Little Women and how a lot of those themes still carry through present day in different, more modern ways, but the ideals are still very similar. So I love coming into the discussion of this story, exploring this world of Bridgerton, coming out of Women's History Month and coming out of having talked about Little Women, because we see a lot of those themes continue to carry through. A lot of those themes of feminism, the choices women had then and how they compare to the choices we have now. Exploring how, even in a society of such restraint, how these women exercised and used the resources they did have available to them to have some type of agency. And we see that a lot in the Bridgerton story of how women take their environment, pretty much take the cards that they're dealt and make the best of that. You know, figure out how to make money, figure out how to make it in the world. What I love also of this being brought to us in a series is, like Nadhya said, you're able to explore so many different characters. And so therefore you're able to see the woman's experience as well as the male's experience through different lenses based on race, based on class. You see how these women have to navigate this world.
The one of the reasons that I think discussing this Bridgerton story coming out of Women's History Month and coming out of like our vibes discussion on Little Women is important is because we see very similar limitations here, right? So like we said, when Shondaland chose to bring this story to the screen, they made a lot of changes that allowed them to tweak the diversity and racial makeup of the Ton, that allowed them to kind of like, you know, interrogate some racial biases, but they kept a bunch of other rules in place because they provide the setting for the central conflicts, like marriage, women not having much say in like their lives or in society, attitudes around sex and sexuality. So a lot of those things were kept intact because if you take all those things out, you're in 2023, baby. Like that's not, you don't have a real set of conflicts anymore to fight against. And the use of like subterfuge with the women, like trying to find these loopholes and these ways that they can affect their destiny and like control their lives. It's very Pride and Prejudice in that way. It's very Little Women in that way of like, no, I'm a woman and that doesn't mean I'm dumb. I'm perfectly aware of the limitations of my power. I'm perfectly aware of how much control over my life men have. I now need to find more covert ways to affect my destiny in the face of all of these fucking men making decisions for me. And we see tons of that dynamic present in season 1.
Right. And just to mention up top, because this is something I had to look up when I first entered the exploration of the Regency world. Okay. So the Ton is just what they call like these few hundred wealthy families who abide to this conduct and fashion and social customs of the time in this specific society.
Mm-hmm.
So that would mean the rich people and the aristocrats of this specific town. They're the ton.
And the ton is references more the group of people and their shared social coexistence than it does a location or than it does London,
Right.
etc.
Right, exactly. So this is the ton of Regency England.
Correct. High class, highfalutin, fancy people.
Yeah.
So Bridgerton season 1 is composed of 8 1-hour-long episodes, and it was dropped in one single batch on Christmas Day of 2020. As we go through our discussion, we will be covering this, fingers crossed, in Bridgerton we pray, in 2 parts.
Pray tell, how are we going to cover this?
In 2 parts, where we do a recap of episodes 1 through 4 in part 1 and a recap of episodes 5 through 8 in part 2. And that will conclude our season 1 recap, and then we will proceed with season 2.
Up until this point, we've only done movies.
Yeah.
This is the first series that we're covering. I mean, and you guys already know how much we struggle with brevity.
Yes.
When we're discussing themes and the story and plots of a movie and how we interpret them. So we're kind of like, all right, let's see how this goes. But also we felt we wanted to do Bridgerton because it's so us in like the media that we consume. And it was one of those things that when it came out, we were literally calling each other like, dude, you got to watch this. Dude, did you see this? What did you think of that? This was part of like our sister discussions over the phone.
Yes.
While we lived thousands of miles away. So with the new season coming out, we were like, should we cover Bridgerton? And we're like, yeah, let's give it a try. Let's give it a go and see, because there's so much in the storytelling, the costuming, and the colors they wear, even how they wear their hair. Like there's so much to pick up on that we think is so much fun.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah. I've watched through season 1 independently of this maybe like 3 or 4 times. I know it was a comfort show for Paola for a while there, so I know she watched it significantly more than I did.
It was tough though, because when this was out, my kids were much younger, obviously.
Not that it would even help their current age.
No, yeah. Like I think now I would have to be even more careful watching this, like out and about. But still, it was like there were only a few episodes that I knew I could have on, like while I'm cooking. Yeah, you need alone time.
You need alone time. Bada and I talk about this, or have mentioned this rather, when we've discussed Fellow Travelers, when we've discussed One Day, the first time we watched it, because we weren't 100% sure, what they're putting when. We were like, okay, this is an alone show. I'm going to watch this home by myself, and I'm going to determine what is appropriate. And yeah, season 1 of Bridgerton has many chunks where it is an alone show.
I don't think that was clear up front. Right? Like it was presented as like this Regency drama, and I think everyone's thinking like, okay, like Pride and Prejudice. Like, oh, we know
the
this.
most we're gonna get is a nice hand touch.
I sat with my mom to watch this show, and Anthony Bridgerton made that complicated in the first couple of episodes.
He sure did.
I mean, but it's fine. It's in passing. You see Anthony's ass for like not even 10 seconds, maybe 5 seconds. But when we got to episode 4, no, or is it 5? End of episode 5.
End of episode 5 and all of episode 6.
I was like, oh, okay, this is weird and awkward.
Shit.
Yeah. And I mean, and by then you're already like, now your mom's going to look at you weird if you take it off. Like, no.
Because now she's going to be like, what? I thought we were all adults.
What are you hiding? We're all adults here.
And it's like, guess what? We're not.
One of you is going to cop out. I mean, we made it bravely, but it was a little awkward.
A little bit. A little awkward. Okay. So let's get into some of the background of season 1. Who it was, some of the players in the background of creating Bridgerton. the show. So as we mentioned, Shonda Rhimes of Shondaland fame as a prolific producer and writer, TV show developer, showrunner. She was one of the top executive producers on this show. It was also executive produced by Chris Van Dusen, who is credited as the creator of Bridgerton and served as the showrunner for seasons 1 and 2. He also has worked behind Scandal, another Shondaland show, and Grey's Anatomy, another Shondaland show. So Tom Verica, who is the head of creative production for Shondaland and Netflix, he has served as the director of several episodes of Bridgerton and has also served as a writer for Bridgerton. He's like very, very tied into the production of the show. Fun fact, Tom Verica was also an actor for a long time.
He was, yeah.
And if you see his face, you're like, oh my God, I've seen you. You're that guy from that thing. I remember watching an episode of like fucking Law & Order SVU, and it was like guest star Tom Verica, and I was like, the producer of Bridgerton? Anywho, additional executive producer Betsy Beers, who is very intimately involved with Grey's Anatomy. Something that I think is really important to mention about Bridgerton, especially when you contrast it to other popular shows of the last like 4 or 5 years, is that they seem to really have an emphasis on diversifying their writers' room, and diverse writers in the writers' room make choices that you see plainly on the show and have made the show so much better. Even just including writers of like certain races or certain cultural backgrounds have had huge like ripple effects on the show. I think that's amazing.
And adds a layer of authenticity throughout.
100%. And we'll discuss that much more in detail when we discuss season 2. It's something that I love about this show. So the main writers, as far as season 1 go, are Chris Van Dusen, who again is credited as the creator, showrunner, executive producer. That man did not sleep for several years. And Julia Quinn, who wrote the original source material. So really quick, I'm just going to take a couple seconds to be a hater. Julia Quinn is a career author, right? So she's a romance novel author. She has been writing for a very long time. These books came out again in the first 5 or 6 years of the 2000s, beginning in 2000 with The Duke and I, Daphne's love story. So the books are fine. And I think it takes a very talented, creative mind to look at a piece of media, appreciate what's there, and also acknowledge the white space. What can I put in here? How can I build this? And the fact that it was done with Bridgerton after reading the Bridgerton books, that like quadrupled my already sizable amount of respect for all of the people that were behind the creation of this show, because the books are very quick to read. They're very easy to read. They're not terribly long. They're episodic. You're supposed to kind of read them as installments. As far as like quality or like how they're written, they're fine. They're fine.
Well, you're not saying anything by saying they're fine. Just say what you want to say.
Dog, it's that I love a romance novel. I love like a quick, short read. The Bridgerton books don't really land in that category for me. They don't like serve that purpose for me. They kind of hit on some pretty like controversial themes, I would say, without examining them properly. Generally, and not going into detail until we get to this episode in the show, but like in season 1, you have issues with like consent, assault, a lot of issues with like truth and honesty, which that gets to be more like interpersonal character exploration. But the consent and assault is so poorly handled in the book and then contributes to it being not handled very well in the show. That kind of continues throughout the books, where you have these kind of very like ham-handed attempts at deepening the plot with like sexual conflict between men and women. Personally, I hate that. I think that's like cheap. And I think it's the way that it's done is not examined anywhere near enough to make it salient to the plot, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I respect that point of view. I feel like even in the series though, as in the books, like the characters make questionable choices. They're all flawed, which is, I think, a good thing for the relatability of a character and of a story, right? And I think this is a cop-out because she is a modern writer of this century and time that we live in. But maybe for the time that she's writing for, where sex was used as a tool
of control and coercion.
There's a lot of that in the storytelling. Sex was like one of the tools that women had where they controlled their environment. And sex was the tool of mankind since the beginning of mankind that they've used to control women. So that's a theme that's present in all of the books, except for my favorite one, which is Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, which is like the least liked book because it has the least amount of sexual conflict. But anyway, one thing I will say about Julia Quinn's Bridgerton series is that I know that I picked it up and started reading it and I'm locked in until I'm done.
Yeah, that's a great thing. Anything that takes us to reading is good.
Yeah, it's a quick, easy read.
Yes.
There's not a lot to think about. There's literally, you're presented with like these two main characters.
Will they, won't they?
You know, will they, won't they? And we all know they will. And it's fun to get to the part where they do, because that's always nice and steamy. And when I need like a quick read and like just something fucking light, like where my brain's tired,
yeah,
I go back and I revisit some of these stories. So as an author, what else can you ask for?
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Than entertaining your reader and keeping them engaged. And I can definitely say that for the Bridgerton series.
Yeah, entertaining your reader, keeping them engaged, and obviously making them repeat customers, right? Like, you want them to come back for all 8 books. Like, you and I have read 4, and I'm obviously going to read the following 4 when their storylines become like more salient to the plot of the show. Like, what did you get? You got a reader that bought 4 fucking books or rented them at the library or whatever.
And one thing she always does is she always includes an epilogue at the end of like, okay, where these characters are a few years down the line, which gives you a little bit more of a peek into like the next person's story. And then that keeps you wanting to know like, okay, what's happening with the next Bridgerton brother or sister. Mm-hmm. But I am 100% certain that this show is what has made this woman money. Like, woo! She doesn't have to write a thing for the rest of her life.
She's living.
Yeah, she doesn't have to. She all she got to do is do the little interviews, participate in press next time they're releasing a show. But she's set. Like, if she writes more, it's truly because it's her passion. She doesn't need to make more money.
Even like on her Instagram, she's living, she's thriving, she's attending events, she's putting on fun hats. And good for her. Good for her. One could only wish to have one singular good idea that would do as much for them.
Or if you're more of the Nadhya minded, not that good of an idea, and like just fucking running. Yeah, a medium idea.
A medium idea and lots of guts. If only
write down your medium idea, and you don't,
you never fucking
you have
know.
No idea what can happen.
I think in this show it's very, very evident that you have women like making some, if not most, if not all of the creative decisions and pacing it well. I think like another thing about this show generally is it's very well paced, and that's like important, especially when you're moving through what effectively serves as a mini series. Like, each season kind of serves as its own capsule of a story that just tie together into the following season, and the pacing in that is really important. You don't want to have 4 episodes where nothing fucking happens and then 4 episodes where everything happens. Like, why would you watch the show? Anywho, getting off that tangent. So, more people that are behind this show. Music. So we all know that Paola is a big lover of a good score and of good music. Paola, tell us who the music is created by.
Chris Bowers. Ate and left no crumbs. So he's behind the score for Bridgerton season 1, Bridgerton season 2, and I believe also Queen Charlotte. Mm-hmm. He is incredibly talented. I love the music in this series. Mm-hmm. And aside from his pieces that have been composed for the series, they've also done such an amazing job of scouting out artists that do classical renditions of modern songs. Out of many things, I think it's some of the top things that make Bridgerton stand out as a period drama, mm-hmm. is having these classical versions of modern songs that we listen to on a daily basis, of like pop songs. Mm-hmm. Specifically for season 1, they used a group called the Vitamin String Quartet, mm-hmm. did all the classical renditions of the pop songs that you hear in this season. And I follow them on Spotify now. Chris Bowers' soundtrack for Bridgerton and Vitamin String Quartet became the backdrop to like my design school music. Like, this is what I was drawing to. It's what helped me get my degrees.
It totally was. I remember like going to visit you while you were finishing school, and in the car, it was only the Bridgerton soundtrack.
Oh my God. My Spotify rap that year was hilarious. I was such a nerd.
And I just want to say, so Chris Bowers was actually nominated for a Grammy for Best Score Composed for Visual Media.
He just won an Academy Award, I believe, for Best Documentary Short for The Last Repair Shop, which was a documentary about people who repair and service instruments and then donate them back into schools.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
He was director of that documentary.
Oh, shit. That's so cool.
So aside from being a talented composer, he's also a director who just won an Academy Award for The Last Repair Shop. He is booked and busy. Like, he also worked on Bob Marley, The Color Purple, Origin. I mean, this guy, he's out there.
And with an emphasis on Black media.
100%. I mean, he's great Black American representation in the world of classical music and composing. Mm-hmm. He's 34.
Kill me, shoot me in the fucking face every fucking time, Paola. Every fucking time.
We're at the age now where anytime we Google somebody fucking talented, famous, and rich, they're younger than us, and it's infuriating.
In the face.
You have 3 more years, Nadja. You got 4 more years.
I got to be mediocre. Okay, well, it'll be tough, but I'll make it just under the wire. Ooh, throw me into the ocean. So moving on to other people that'll make me feel bad about myself and where I'm at 30. The costume design team. Yo, the fucking costume design for Bridgerton, y'all. Like, if you have watched it, whatever you know about it, it is so fucking good. I mean, the attention to detail that's paid. And when I say detail, I mean fucking detail. I don't mean like, oh, the colors that each family wears. No, like those things are very important. And they tell a lot about character and draw distinctions between people. But I'm telling you, embroidery, lace, the patterns of the embellishments on their fucking gloves and on their hair clips and on their necklaces and in their earrings. The attention to detail paid to every single character in every single facet of what they wear is unhinged, wild, egregious. I love it. It's so fucking good. As I'm watching season 1 with my husband, I was going through and pausing and being like, what are they wearing? Is that a butterfly? What kind of butterfly is that? What type of flower is that? And like, my husband's like a gardener, so he's a nature person, and he's like, oh, that's this type of flower. That's this type of flower. Like, shit, I don't fucking know. I grew up, in urban environment, and and like, that's this type of butterfly, and that's this and that's that. I know for a fact, to my fucking toes, if I looked up what does this flower mean, it would be relevant to the fucking scene that it's in. Like, it's so well thought out, and they're all incredibly talented. So the costume designers for Bridgerton, kind of scattered throughout Bridgerton season 1 and 2, like a lot of people, came back and worked on episodes in both, is a team that is made up of John Glazer, John Norster, Sophie Canale, and Ellen Mirojnick. Something that Paola called out is that these creators didn't really do many period dramas prior to Bridgerton or around the time of Bridgerton. And that brought this like incredible fresh eye to the costuming of this show. For example, like Sophie Canale, the thing that she's going to be most well known for going forward, Saltburn.
Oh, yes. She did Saltburn.
So you're like, the same person that did Saltburn worked on Bridgerton? Like, what?
And you're almost like, oh, but to me that kind of makes sense. Like, just in the prestige of how these outfits look and how the costuming is, and then how important storytelling to kind of give you a visual hierarchy of these people.
And Ellen Mirojnick, the last film that she worked on as costume designer, Oppenheimer.
And you wouldn't think Oppenheimer and Bridgerton, but that's what I mean when you have these creators with this vast experience. They all just brought their own expertise and their own experience to this team. Mm-hmm. And you can just see like the wealth of knowledge when it comes to the costuming of Bridgerton.
And like, what else did Ellen Mirojnick work on? Just to round her out a little bit, Failure to Launch, The Chronicles of Riddick. Like, This bitch has the career spectrum, and I love that for her.
Yes. So for production designer, Nadja, the only name that came up was Will Hughes Jones.
Right. So the series production design done by Will Hughes Jones, who also has worked on Jane Eyre, 2011. Paola loves that movie.
My boo. I love that movie. It's so moody.
It's so fucking moody. He worked on The Spanish Princess, The White Princess, The Alienist. So these are all variations on a period drama. Like The Spanish Princess, that's in the 1500s. The White Princess, I believe that's either in the 1500s or the 1600s. The Alienist is in the 1860s, if I'm not mistaken, and that was a TV show. All of these, actually, were TV shows.
He's bringing his wealth of knowledge, yeah.
He's bringing big guns of experience and a wealth of period knowledge, and then you have younger designers like Sophie Canale, who's bringing zingers, ideas, newness, and I think having a varied team like that makes the show sharp. Like, it looks good.
It really does.
And as far as awards go, we're not going to name them all because it's too fucking many. Because this show has received 12 Emmy nominations, multiple SAG nominations, NAACP Image Award nominations. It has taken home 2 Emmys, a SAG Award for Makeup and Hair, Image Award for Outstanding Actor for Regé-Jean Page.
Most of the awards it got was for costume and makeup. Because,
Yeah, come on. Come on.
Come on.
All right, sister. I know I've been talking for a long time. What's up with that fucking scorecard?
So to hit you with the scorecard, is this a straight or queer story? I mean, it is set in the Regency period, so we see a lot of straight cis romance, but Shondaland does a very good job of bringing in not only racial diversity, but also a lot of LGBTQ representation. Through season 1, we get queer representation peppered in through side characters.
I think a lot of people have been a bit disappointed with queer representation in Bridgerton, and I think the racial diversity on this show has lulled us into like this false sense of a utopia of like what the time period is meant to be, because again, it's like, yeah, they picked and chose which elements they were going to keep and which they were going to change. Race was something that they have made a very concerted effort to like be inclusive about on the show.
It wasn't colorblind casting.
No, it wasn't.
Though. There is a storytelling behind the racial identity of the main characters.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're not just creating this world out from nothing. It's been given to us in snippets. Later on, I believe in Queen Charlotte is where you see more of like where that diversity came from and how that came to be. So it's not just like, oh, we're making shit up. There's a reasoning behind these elements of storytelling. So I'm sure that when it comes to bringing in more queer representation, that's going to come with an element of storytelling as well. I don't think they're just going to throw it in. You know, they're not just going to have queer couples to have queer couples, just like they don't have black couples just to have black couples. It comes with a backstory and explaining how they exist and how it's accepted in this world.
Right. Or not accepted or maneuvered. Does this have source material? It sure does. And it is the Bridgerton novel series written by Julia Quinn. The story is by a woman. The series is written, I guess, mostly by men, but also by a lot of women who are in the writing room on that writing team. So what's the trope?
One thing I love about Bridgerton as a series is that in focusing on like a central love story, even though we follow so many different characters and also their coming out and their love stories, by focusing on one central love story, you get to explore different tropes for each season. So for this season with Daphne and the Duke, which are our 2 main players, the 2 central protagonists for this season, we have a fake dating trope.
All right. Getting into
back of the book.
The back of the book summary. Back of the book summary.
You want this back of the book summary? So
what the fuck?
You want this back of the book?
No. Okay.
The year is 1813. Wealth, lust, and betrayal set in the backdrop of Regency era England, seen through the eyes of the powerful Bridgerton family. 8 close-knit siblings attempting to find love. Bridgerton season 1 follows Daphne Bridgerton, played by Phoebe Dynevor, the eldest daughter of the powerful Bridgerton family, as she makes her debut into Regency London's competitive marriage market. Hoping to follow in her parents' footsteps and find a match sparked by true love, Daphne's prospects initially seem to be unrivaled, but as her older brother begins to rule out her potential suitors, the high society scandal sheet written by the mysterious Lady Whistledown casts aspersions on Daphne, who enters into an agreement with the popular Duke of Hastings to attract eligible suitors.
Ooh. So before we get into the episode by episode, the general thoughts and themes on this show are young women trying to make their own paths and making their own paths by coming out into society as debutantes and entering the marriage mart. Mothers setting their expectations for their daughters, and not only setting an expectation verbally, but setting an expectation with their lives and the people that they are, leading by example to an extent. Marriage as a business proposition, insert Amy's speech from Little Women. Men avoiding or not wanting to participate in the marriage mart, and how easy it is for them to avoid it where women cannot. Men can opt out and women can't.
No, and you see the comparison between the rake versus the spinster.
Yep.
Right? The unmarried male, and how that's kind of
cool and fine.
Not celebrated, but it's, that doesn't make you you're not outcasted by society for being a rake. However, you are slightly outcasted for being a spinster.
Yes. And
if you're not a married woman of a certain age, after a certain age.
And there are real historical figures, just like Queen Charlotte and King George, very fictionalized real historical figures sprinkled in throughout the story. So that's fun. Kind of anchors us a little bit in reality, just the slightest bit. But this is this is the equivalent of watching a show set in outer space, y'all. So I love this shit, but I acknowledge the no reality of it. So, all right, getting into episode 1 of Bridgerton, season 1. Really, the bulk of character introduction, dynamic setting, stake setting for the entire show is in episode 1. So we're going to spend a little bit of time kind of providing you with slightly more details and then kind of run through the rest of the episodes in the season. So we open to the voice of the illustrious Queen of Genovia herself, Mary to the Poppin'. I'm dead, Paola.
Married to the Poppin', Julie Andrews herself.
Just to provide a little, God damn you, dude.
I'm sorry.
So for the entirety of the Bridgerton series, so far at least, right? So for seasons 1 and 2, Julie Andrews has served as the voice of Lady Whistledown, who for the bulk of season 1 serves as this anonymous, omniscient narrator who is the author of this scandalous gossip sheet that everybody in the town gets delivered every few days. And no one knows who she is, but she knows fucking everything. This woman has ears in the walls. So Julie Andrews, Lady Whistledown, one and the same. She's going to tell us what the fuck is up, baby. And we open in Grosvenor Square, 1813. Because the time has officially come, ladies and gentlemen, to place our bets for the upcoming social season. Who the fuck is going to get married? And who are they getting married to? And are they going to have a lot of money? Through the Lady Whistledown voice, we are introduced first to the Featherington family. Just so yellow. There's just so much yellow around the Featheringtons.
There is so many warm, bright colors.
And all of them have red hair and cool toned skin, and they all look like absolute ass. So
they look like highlighters.
Lady Whistledown is particularly vicious on this family. She describes their mama as tasteless and tactless. The first to protest is Penelope on behalf of her sister Prudence. As the women are together getting dressed, Prudence is being tight-laced into a corset that will absolutely lead to her demise. Already, you're like, what is going on, Lady Featherington? And she's saying that, with tight lacing, she could squeeze her waist into the size of an orange and a half. Absolutely fucking not. You couldn't. That's all the organs and some bones. No.
Truly. But this is giving you an example of the mothers setting on their own expectations onto their daughters based on the experiences they had coming up a generation prior. And I feel like that's something we can all relate to as well.
Has anyone ever had an almond mom? Okay, so
just have an almond.
Have a handful of almonds and a glass of water, and you're going to feel great all day. All of the Featherington women have P names. The mother is Portia. The daughters in age order are Prudence, Philippa, and Penelope. Penelope is our fave. We get to know her pretty damn well. Following the Featheringtons, we are introduced to the Bridgerton house and the Bridgerton family next in their gorgeous, light, bright, airy, pale blue and bright whites, open, ample home.
You already see like the direct contrast between the Featheringtons and the Bridgertons.
Lady Whistledown, continuing in her voiceover, writes that they have far better odds because they have beautiful sons who we see in a portrait as the camera pans over the hallway. Those sons are going to be Anthony, Benedict, and Colin. They're the firstborns. And then we get 3 beautiful daughters in a second portrait as the camera pans over, which is Daphne, Eloise, and Francesca. The first that we hear moaning and groaning is Eloise about her dress. I'm going to make this joke a lot, but like I am Eloise. Eloise is me. Okay. Then we meet the youngest Bridgerton children. These are Hyacinth and Gregory. In addition to 2 of the elder boys, Benedict and Colin.
Like everybody's getting ready.
You can tell that they're waiting. And they're waiting for Daphne. She is the last one to exit. Her dress, tiara, eyebrows have a fully Audrey Hepburn vibe. My Fair Lady era Audrey Hepburn. She has a very like 1950s styling sensibility to her throughout the entire series that they keep pretty consistent.
Oh, and the little bangs.
And the teeny tiny bangs. My tiny bangs.
Oh, no.
She has like this lovely heart-shaped like elfin face. Elfin in that all of her features are like very delicate, feminine,
small,
childlike,
yes.
and small.
She is very petite.
She
yes.
is. She's teeny tiny. And they're all kind of anxious waiting for Daphne. And the whole family, I mean, the way that they're interacting is super funny. Like they're just interacting
I love it.
like siblings. Like you imagine siblings from this time period being like, I don't know, straight jacketed onto a chair so that they stay away from each other and don't play or have any fun. And the Bridgerton kids are just running around fucking with each other and just teasing, even the elder ones. So Anthony, the eldest brother, the Viscount Bridgerton, who has inherited the title of Viscount from his deceased father, is nowhere to be found. We cut to Anthony fucking a woman against a tree in the forest.
Yep. Just got a nice little moonshot of an Anthony Bridgerton booty while the footman's waiting for him. Meanwhile,
so
my
uncomfortable.
guy is pumping and checking his watch. Like, if you don't. So, you know, very romantic in this.
When I started watching Bridgerton for the first time, Christmas Day 2020, the way that was a jump scare.
Dude, that's what I'm saying. Like, you're watching this as like an adult family. And this scene cuts and you're like, oh shit.
Wow.
This was like the first gut punch when you're like, this isn't a regular period drama.
We're back in the carriage with Daphne, her mother, and Colin and Benedict. And in this carriage from the window, you see Buckingham Palace, which was under construction during this time. Whoever does the green screen on this show, give them every single award because those visual effects are no joke. Hire them for red, white, and royal blue.
Honestly, can we please? Because most of the backdrop in Bridgerton is green screen.
Yes, almost all of it.
Anytime they pan a shot of Grosvenor Square or they pan a shot of the palace, it's all green screen. It is so well done.
On the whole, very, very well done. So now we are inside with the Bridgertons as they join kind of a group of very similarly dressed women with their mothers. Everybody's fretting and looking anxious.
Everybody gets feathers in their hair.
Everyone has huge feathers in their hair and they're all wearing white and silver.
That was like part of it.
And as a novice viewer, I was really confused when I was watching this initially. I was like, what are they doing? Where are they going? Why is everybody wearing white and this fucking feather? And we pan over, we see a portrait of King George and Queen Charlotte, also introduced by Lady Whistledown in voiceover. They cut to Queen Charlotte solo, surrounded by ladies in waiting and like maids and servants, waiting for this presentation to begin. She is bored. You already get the vibe. You're like, damn, she's an asshole. And I see that already. That actress is stupendous.
She's amazing. You're definitely supposed to get the impression like this woman is not easily impressed and she needs to have things her way.
Yes.
She needs to be entertained. She needs to be impressed. So in real life, Queen Charlotte, like she led London's social society at the time. Like she was known to love a social event. and organize social events and be present at social events. Like, she wasn't the monarch like that you barely got to see. Like, she was outside all the time.
The monarch you barely got to see was her husband, King George, unfortunately known by history as the Mad King or the Spitting King. The Spitting King in Hamilton. No, just kidding. But he suffered from increasingly severe issues with his mental health for his entire life, and the last 10 to 20 years of his life he was rarely, if ever, seen outside of the palace. He was incredibly ill, unfortunately. So that's why it's called the Regency era, because there was a regent, someone who was ruling in King George's stead until he was recovered enough in his health.
In and out. Yeah, it would be like in and out. Sometimes it would be Queen Charlotte. For a time it was his son, just while he had these spouts of mental health issues. So that is something that they do also explore in the show. So you do see some of that play out on Bridgerton, which I think is important to the time.
It's important to the time, and it's also important because it rounds out the context of some of the choices Queen Charlotte makes that would otherwise probably confuse you. So we've got all these ladies kind of cooped up, literally like birds, with all them damn feathers, waiting to be seen by the queen. And they're all going to be presented to the queen because they're all the new debutantes. The presentation begins, and this MC announces all of these fucking ridiculous names and titles and announces everybody at the door as they're entering. The Featheringtons enter. All 3 Featherington daughters are being presented at the same time, which is something that I think is kind of not done.
I think, to quote Lady Whistledown, tactless. They could barely fit through the door together. They did not present well.
No.
At all.
No strategy. And Prudence, the one that we saw being like tight-laced into a corset, faints because she can't fucking breathe. So the queen disapproves because, ew, she fainted. That's disgusting.
Like, ew, gross. Like, get your shit together.
Right after the Featheringtons present, it is Daphne's turn as the first Bridgerton girl, the eldest Bridgerton girl to present as a debutante in society. She walks up. Again, it's very Audrey Hepburn. She's statuesque. She's smooth, stunning. This awesome score plays. She does this incredible curtsy in front of the queen. The queen tips up her chin, gives her a little fucking forehead kiss, and goes, "Flawless, my dear." Basically saying, like, you're the best. You're the best one. And that's the intro, right? So we have not all of our major players, but we've got most of them. We've got the monarchs. We've got the Bridgerton family, who obviously, because of the title of the show, you know, we will be focusing on. We've got the Featheringtons, who run kind of parallel to the Bridgertons. Now we've got opening credits, incredible score, little like animated tree of life type of visual. After the opening credits,
the tree of life.
Yeah, that's honestly how I see it. I'm like, oh, it's a tree of life.
It really is. And so carved into the tree or growing out of the tree are different elements that you will see play out throughout the series. For each season, it seems that this is going to change, because it did change for season 2.
All right. So we cut to Lady Whistledown society papers being passed all through town. We see people in the street buying them from like newsboys. We see them being dropped off at people's doors, and we're cutting over to.
They're not being bought. No, yet.
They're
just being passed out.
So
for free, and this surprises everyone.
Yes. And we cut to the Bridgertons. Everybody's home after the presentation. Everyone's buzzing. Everyone's excited that Daphne did so well. Eloise is going through the society papers and kind of reading them out loud. Lady Bridgerton's like, "Girl, stop reading that shit. It's gossip. It's the National Enquirer. Don't read that." And Eloise is like, "Except for the fact that this bitch is calling people out by their fucking names."
Because gossip society papers were a thing of the time.
Yes.
But people weren't named out. They were like code names or like descriptors.
In this gossip like rag, Lady Whistledown is also the first to coin the term the diamond of the season for Daphne Bridgerton. So everybody kind of later on thinks it's the queen. The queen kind of adopts the term.
But it was Lady Whistledown who coined it and named her the incomparable and called her the diamond of the first water.
Yes. And we get additional stakes added, right? Because when you start at the top, when you're 20 years old, Billie Eilish, and you win an Oscar, where the fuck do you go from there? What happens after? So that's where Daphne is. Now she's going to be fighting for her life to try and stay at the top of whatever arbitrary social structure they've created and try and find the best quote unquote match, the best husband for herself, the best financial situation. It's a lot of 3-dimensional chess. So we see the Featheringtons again, and Lady Whistledown has just ground them into beef in this fucking paper. She does not like the Featheringtons. She's playing them out, and 3 girls out at the same time, except now we learn that the Featheringtons will be accepting a fourth girl. They will be caretaking for a distant cousin on their husband's side who is around the same age as a debutante and will need to be out in society to find a husband. So now Portia Featherington is like, how the fuck am I going to do this with 4 girls? On top of the fact that I kind of suck and I'm not that great a person.
And even Penelope is like, can I sit this season out? You know, like that's going to be a lot. And Portia Featherington is pretty much like, yeah, no, you're going to be out in society with the rest of your sisters. And also like this girl or this distant cousin, like she's a country girl. She's not going to be any competition.
She's a country girl. She po. And we're out here. We're better than that. So Penelope and her sisters have the dynamic of Penelope being the youngest and her sisters almost having like a Cinderella stepsister vibe where they shit on her all the time.
Oh, they're shit on her a lot. They suck.
They're mean. They're dumb as well. So I think that emphasizes the Cinderella stepsister thing more. So who else do we see? Oh yeah, this cousin from the country, this poor ass bitch arrives, Miss Marina Thompson, who is
beautiful,
prettier than any of the Featherington girls, gorgeous natural curly hair. She's charming. She's got this lovely voice. And Portia Featherington is like, God fucking damn it. As if my daughters weren't fucking weird enough. Now we got this one living in our home. So the Featherington colors, as we mentioned, they wear like bright citrusy colors. I would say they wear these yellows that have like a green undertone. Like the colors do not suit any of them. So the joke that's not really made in the show but is made in the book is that Lady Featherington says happy girls wear yellow and happy girls in happy colors get married to good husbands. Okay, girl.
And she's very proud of her style.
Yes, she is.
You know, it's not because she doesn't know what she's doing. She does it intentionally. She is very proud of it.
Yeah, so these are all Portia Featherington's choices. After this, we meet Lady Danbury, played by the fucking incredible Adjoa Andoh. And I need to love Lady Danbury for a second. That woman is so fucking cool. That actress plays her so fucking well. The theatrics, the enunciation, the cane, everything. She's incredible. And she's like this older matron of the ton. And she's just pulling strings, baby. She's like puppet master.
No, and even the way that they dress her, there's so much power behind her costuming. First of all, she dresses in like this beautiful, like regal, deep burgundy color, like burgundy and reds. You know, it just feels like a powerful color.
Yes.
She does dress like fashionably for the time in, you know, these flowy dresses, but they structure her shoulders. Sometimes they put her in like these overcoats that have a structured shoulder. They put her in these top hats as well that just like elevate her and round her out. Like it takes her femininity and really balances it out with these like elements that are considered masculine for the time to let you know, like she's a woman in her own right, but she has a lot of power.
And I feel like the duality of her wardrobe and how it uses masculine and feminine elements demonstrates that she's singular and whole. She doesn't have a male counterpart. She doesn't need a male counterpart. She is using all of her own power. And honestly, like, I mean, you'll hear she makes kind of throwaway statements throughout season 1 and season 2 on this, but like she's earned the power. She's like, I had a husband who sucked ass. I've had my kids.
I did all this shit that y'all are doing.
I did all of it.
Cuando ustedes iban, ya yo he ido 10 veces.
Jesus. Like, next level of like, I've been around the block or whatever. Like, you always get that energy from Lady Danbury. I mean, full stop. You get this powerful energy from her. And she's got an incredible mansion. She's super wealthy. She throws balls. Like, she's always out in social events. And she's kind of in the Queen's inner circle. Like, she knows Queen Charlotte, like, well. So Lady Danbury is receiving a guest at Danbury House at her incredible mansion in London. She is receiving none other than the Duke of Hastings. Duke of Hastings, played by Regé-Jean Page. I mean, 2 main players of the Bridgerton cinematic universe. Simon Bassett, now known as the Duke of Hastings. because his father has passed away, is in the process of passing away, and so he has now inherited his father's title, his dukedom, his duchy. He is visiting from like anywhere else. Like they constantly make reference to him having traveled and like been out of the country for a long time. You don't know where the fuck this guy's been.
You don't know where. He's just out and about.
And he's just in town to get his late father's affairs in order. And you can tell just from the way they regard each other. Lady Danbury's like treating him almost like she would treat a grandkid. They have this level of familiarity. She's known him for a very long time. And she also reprimands him kind of like a parent, where she's like, where the fuck have you been? Anyway, you're coming to my ball tonight. I don't give a fuck what you say. You're going to be there. Thanks. And he's like, okay.
He tries to reject it. And he's like, yeah, no, I can't. She's like, yeah, I don't care. You're coming.
Yeah,
he's like,
I
okay,
reject
fine.
a rejection.
Okay, fine. He respects her in a way that he does not question her.
Yeah. At this point, the first episode, I mean, is just cutaway. Like you're learning about everyone. You're seeing everybody in their habitat, right, where they thrive. And now we're cutting back to Anthony Bridgerton, who we previously saw fucking against a tree.
And we see again having just finished fucking.
Lots of sex for Anthony in this season. What we learn about him is that he is dating covertly an opera singer in London whose name is Sienna Rosso. She is not considered part of polite society. She's almost more of like a courtesan, a woman who needs to be maintained by a wealthy man. And he can't commit to her because he needs to marry a quote unquote lady. And they both seem to be like explicitly aware of this. But he promises that he's going to take care of her. He's going to like basically pay for her living. They have sex. He looks at his watch. He is constantly looking at this watch. This becomes like a huge thing in season 1 and in season 2. It's kind of representative of like his responsibilities as Viscount Bridgerton that in the early part of season 1, he is not fucking on top of.
You know what? I wouldn't say that, because I think one thing is being a Viscount, right? And like managing land and like financial affairs and things like that. Another thing is being a protector and a caretaker for a young lady in this society. That he approaches like he's approaching his other affairs, right? Like, oh, this is cut and dry. You know, what do we have to do? Oh, we have to pay this thing. Okay, here, bam, paid. For him, he's approaching Daphne's coming out into society, and Daphne's like finding a husband in the same way. Like, oh, this person checks all the boxes. You're good. Bam, done.
Yep.
Next. The conflict between Daphne and Anthony that we see come into play is that where she's seeing it from a sentimental point of view, she wants to be able to have a relationship and have love between her and her husband. Anthony is kind of like, well, this person has wealth and position and the title and they can provide for you. Okay, they're good. You're done. You don't need anything else. Love will come later on. Like that's not important. And at this point, you kind of just see him as like this unsentimental. He's like an unsentimental businessman when it comes to the marriage mart.
It's annoying, but don't worry. We see Anthony get his. So as we heard Lady Danbury invite the Duke of Hastings to her ball, she is throwing the opening ball of the season, the Danbury Ball. Everyone's dressed in white and silver. So this ball was shot in the Bath Assembly Rooms where actual Regency balls were held in 1813. That's really fucking cool. And there's like so much going on at this ball. Like this must have taken a week or two to film because they're shooting so many different interactions between people. And because, again, as the first episode is giving us like the lay of the land of this universe, we're getting like tidbits of gossip, like about people we don't care about, but just showing you what it is that people are discussing. What are the things that would create scandal? Oh, look at that girl over there. Remember how she was forced into a marriage because she was found making out with like some guy? Oh yeah, they look so unhappy. Like that type of shit that will stick in your mind because later on you're like, oh fuck, like what happens if people get caught together alone? Oh shit, they have to get married?
Yeah, no, that's it. You're ruined and you have
I'm ruined. This is put that on your fucking bingo card because Daphne will only say it 100 times. So Thank You Next by Vitamin String Quartet is playing.
I love that when they open to this ball, you're hearing a classical rendition of Ariana Grande's Thank You Next.
Yeah.
And it's like another hint. This is going to be different than any other Regency period drama that you've experienced. It's another thing that makes Bridgerton stand out. It adds that freshness to this world that they're building.
Absolutely. This is where we really see that Anthony is serving as a massive cock block to Daphne, right? Daphne has just come out in society.
Yeah.
She's like the diamond. The queen said that she was like the best and very
Everyone's
cool.
looking to her.
Everyone's looking at her. She's so pretty. All the men want to dance with her. And every time a man wants to dance with her, Anthony's like, no, you're gross and stupid and you shouldn't get to dance with my sister.
This person doesn't check this imaginary list that I have in my head.
That I have not given to you, that we have no transparency on. And like,
right?
part of you is like, oh, it's sweet because he's like, he cares, right? Like he cares in his way where he wants to be a good older brother. And then the other part of you is like, Anthony, shut the fuck up and let her dance with anybody. God.
So what this does though is like, it makes her seem presumptuous.
Yeah.
It makes her seem like stuck up because she won't enjoy in the party along with all these other debutantes. I mean, and what are these men looking to do? They're looking to make a connection. They're looking to get closer to you. And if you're seeing that this person is kind of like not receptive to any attention from anyone, you're going to keep your distance.
Yeah, absolutely. And that becomes a huge thorn in Daphne's side. So we peep over onto the Featheringtons and we kind of land on Penelope. Again, Penelope, who as the viewer you already have sympathy for because she's getting teased by her sisters. Her mom treats her like trash. She's wearing these awful fucking dresses in these terrible colors. And she's like smart and likes to read and like is friends with Eloise Bridgerton, like Daphne's younger sister. And you're tender on Penelope and you realize that she's the one who's kind of a victim in her household. She's looking at Colin Bridgerton with love eyes, embarrassingly obvious love eyes. And the only reason no one knows is because no one's fucking looking at her.
And it's like this one little moment where you stop on Penelope really tells her story for like the next 3 seasons, where it's just her standing on the sidelines looking at Colin Bridgerton.
Yeah.
This is who her heart pines for. And like you said, nobody just notices her.
Yeah.
She's just on the sidelines the whole time. One of the things Penelope notices, along with the other mamas, is that Colin spots Marina right away. And he's like, who's that? And she's like grabbing a lot of the attention from the men at this ball.
And you know, as the viewer, Penelope's tracking Colin, Colin's tracking Marina, and you're like, oh shit, a bunch of people are going to end up unhappy over here. And we cut over where we see the Duke of Hastings enter surreptitiously, silently. Lady Featherington is like, oh shit, that's the Duke of Hastings. Oh shit, he's a duke and he's back in London. I've got to get my very mediocre and unintelligent daughters in front of him. He'll definitely fall in love with one of them. And as she moves in, pretty much every other overzealous mama and daughter debutante swarm him because now they want to talk to him. They want to get him on their dance cards. He's clearly very uncomfortable. We cut to Daphne finally finding a way to get out of Anthony's grasp. She steps away from him to just fucking, I don't know, breathe and maybe find an organic situation where she can talk to someone. And while she's by herself, she's accosted by this disgusting man. I mean, I'm sure the actor's lovely. I'm sure he's a lovely man. But in the show, they make him disgusting. And his name is Nigel Burbrook. I think he's a baronet or a baron.
He has the worst little teeth.
Ugh!
I hope those aren't your real teeth, sir.
Yeah, I'm sure you're lovely.
If they are, sorry for you.
If they are, we're American, don't listen to us. But she's kind of cornered by this Nigel Burbrook person who I'm sure they've met casually, right? Like they're aware of who the other one is. He's clearly like leering, like he's trying to flirt with her and she's kind of trying to like find her way out of the situation.
He is way older than her.
He's gross. In her attempt to like escape this man and this cringy interaction, she literally runs off to find her brother and ends up fucking body slamming the Duke of Hastings.
Seriously.
Literally on the dance floor and having like a very testy, weird interaction where she's trying to make it seem like she's having a legitimate conversation with this man, even though Burbrook is behind her. And he is misinterpreting that as her trying to flirt with him because he's been mobbed by all of the mamas already. So he's annoyed.
Well, think about trying to have a conversation with a stranger that you have not even been introduced to. Like you just walk up to somebody and start talking.
Especially at that time where like that was literally not done. Like you did not just go up to someone and go, what's your name? I'm Susie. Like, no, you didn't do that. You would find a mutual. They would introduce you. So the Duke is like, what the fuck is your deal? Like, what's wrong with you? Then Anthony spots the Duke talking to Daphne, calls out,
Bassett!
Because Simon and Anthony, turns out they were friends at fucking Oxford. They were friends and roommates in college. And as Anthony approaches, he formally introduces, he's like, hey, like, Bassett, you know, this is my sister, Daphne. And the Duke of Hastings is like, this is your sister? And
he's like surprised.
You can tell by the way he says, this is your sister, that he's like, oh, but she's pretty. Like,
but damn, she looked good though.
Yeah, but I mean, Anthony looks good too for a dude. Again, this interaction was weird, awkward, and testy. They say goodbye and they both turn around to look at each other again. Anthony really wants them to leave. He's like, we're going to keep the gentleman waiting. And Daphne's like, oh, fine. Like, you're the worst. Daphne is supposed to be receiving gentleman callers the following day. What the ball is supposed to do is it's supposed to get you in front of enough people where it stokes interest in men to, first of all, absolutely fucking embarrass themselves, coming to your house laden with gifts and chocolates and flowers, trying to get your attention, literally standing in a line at your home waiting for other men to talk to you first. Like, I would simply pass away on either side of that interaction. And it is really like speed dating.
Anthony makes sure he's there for Daphne. What the guy ends up doing is scaring everyone away. He won't let them sit too close to her. He won't let them talk for an extended amount of time. He just scares them off. And then you cut to the Featherington house where they get tons of gentlemen callers and no one's calling for any of the Featherington girls. They're only coming to see Marina. Lady Whistledown makes sure to emphasize that gentlemen callers stop going to the Bridgerton house and they all go to the Featherington house for Marina, and questions the Queen's judgment in choosing Daphne because it so seems that now nobody wants to visit Daphne. They're visiting Marina. Marina is the true incomparable. And the Queen was mistaken in showing her favor to Daphne. So now Lady Whistledown has essentially undermined the Queen's judgment and placed herself almost as a rival to the Queen. After all of this drama, you know, Daphne is understandably upset with Anthony. We have this moment where Daphne confronts Anthony, who's pretty much like, I'm just trying to protect you. I just want what's best for you. It's my duty. And she's like, what of my duty? You have no idea what it is to be in my position. This is all I have been raised for. If I don't succeed in this one thing, I have failed. I have no other value in this society than to find a proper husband. By contrast, in voiceover, we listen to Lady Whistledown talking about the Duke of Hastings, who has declared that he does not wish to marry. But if you leave it up to the mamas, they are not going to let that shit go down. Lady Danbury and Violet Bridgerton, they start plotting together to be able to make a match between Daphne and Simon. And we see this go down at a dinner when Violet extends an invitation to Lady Danbury for Simon, and Lady Danbury accepts on his behalf. So he has to go because we already know how he respects Lady Danbury. He's not going to say no to her. At this dinner, they have this funny scene where everyone's speculating on who Lady Whistledown is or might be. All the boys assume it's a man. One of the guesses coming from the youngest Bridgerton is, I think it's a Featherington. And everybody just cracks the fuck up. Like, everybody's like, of course it can't be a Featherington. Have you read what Lady Whistledown writes about the Featheringtons? And that's funny because that comes back later. So at this dinner, Daphne and the Duke go tit for tat as they discuss not liking each other while like throwing little slight insults. Daphne just sees him as like a lonely rake, a fuckboy hoeing around the country. And he just sees her as like this prim and proper little girl who's just desperate to be married. That evening after the dinner, Anthony's upset with Violet, his mother. He's like, you know, why are you getting involved? You know, this is my responsibility to like set up Daphne. And Violet's like, no. Anthony's argument is that the Duke is not suitable for Daphne. Violet defends this by saying reformed rigs make the best husbands.
Dad.
And I think we all know why that is. Okay.
It's so funny.
He is experienced, baby. He knows what he's doing. He knows what women want. Anthony resents Violet, his mother, for trying to manage the situation when he sees himself as the man of the house. Violet checks him on this and pretty much calls him out for trying to toe the line between being the family man and being a bachelor. Like, oh, you talk about responsibility and being the man of the house, but you won't settle down. And she spells it out for him, relying on your younger brothers to do the job that you won't do. and adds that if his father was alive, Daphne wouldn't be going through what she's going through, being shunned by everyone else in the town for not being able to have a suitor at this point. So after saying this, like, if your father was here, she would not be in this situation. He would have made an arrangement. He would have figured something out. What she's trying to do, right? She's trying to make an arrangement with Lady Danbury and trying to arrange this match for her daughter. So Anthony takes this piece of advice, and what he ends up fucking doing is promising Daphne to Lord Birdbrook without Daphne's consent. He's like, I made this deal. Daphne's going to get married to this guy. He checks all the boxes. He's wealthy. He's had a title. He's a gentleman. That's it. She's done. And also ends his relationship with Sienna, the opera singer.
Kind of in the periphery, we see that people are starting to pay the newsboys for Lady Whistledown's scandal sheet, right? So you can assume that whoever's writing it is now making a living. Now we have the Vauxhall Ball. At the Vauxhall Ball, we see Colin interacting with Penelope. He's really asking her about Marina, and Penelope lets him know, hey, Marina's sick. Cressida Cowper, who is like another kind of tertiary character. She's this girl who's like a member of the Ton. She's really snotty. This girl has a 7 head, an 8 head. Like, her hair is constantly very tightly pulled back, and her forehead could not be any bigger. She's a mean girl. Like, she's a bully. So she interrupts Colin's conversation with Penelope, spills her drink on Penelope. And in that moment, Colin is like
a hero.
Yeah, like, he's trying to be a hero, frustrated by the fact that she's so obviously a bully. And it's like, no, I'm going to go dance with Penelope. And Penelope's like tripping because this is her crush and she is in love with Colin.
They dance to an Irish jig, which is important to Nicola, who plays Penelope, because she is of Irish descent. She knew the dance since she was 5. I thought that was a cute tidbit.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. I knew she was Irish, but I didn't know that was an Irish jig. That's very cute. Yeah, so we cut away from the ball and get back into the Featherington home, where we find out that the reason Marina's home is because this bitch has not gotten her period, even though she's been staying with them for over a month. I'm just going to go ahead and say justice for people with like PCOS and irregular periods, because the way everyone would have thought I was pregnant when I was a teenager. Yeah, Marina has not gotten her period. And what we know from this time is, bitch, that means you are pregnant. Now we're back at the ball. Daphne is finding out about Anthony's deal with Birdbrook, and she is like beside herself. She's so fucking angry. She runs out of the ball. She's trying to get some air in these gardens by herself, which is a crazy decision for reasons that we will soon come to learn.
While she goes get some air, she comes across Birdbrook, and she lets him know, like, listen, my brother made a mistake. Like, I'm not going to marry you. And he gets angry. He's like, why do you think you're better than me? And he almost literally runs up on her, tries to grab her arms. And she's like, let me go. And ends up punching him straight in the face. Knocks him the fuck out. Watching this is the Duke of Hastings, who was coming from somewhere, what Daphne calls the Dark Walk. He witnesses this interaction and comes to her defense, but he didn't make it on time. She knocked Birdbrook the fuck out. So she actually didn't need his help. She held her own. So he comes and finds out that Anthony promised her to Lord Birdbrook. He hates that for her as much as she hates that for herself. You know, he mentions his surprise that suitors aren't lining up at her door anymore. And also mentions his resent over Lady Whistledown and what she's been writing about himself and about her as well. So as they're kind of going back and forth and sharing their frustration over their current situation, he comes up with a plan that he thinks will solve their collective Lady Whistledown issue. What if they pretend to court? The ambitious moms of the town will possibly leave him alone, stand off a little bit, and it will also make her seem desirable in the eyes of the other men of the town. And he says, provided that you don't wish to marry me and I don't wish to marry you, this can work. Haha, dun dun dun. Something that I love is how they explain this in voiceover as they're walking back into the party next to each other, set up for a dance together. Everybody's watching. Everybody's looking at them. They quite literally stop the party because everyone's surprised that, one, he's entertaining a female because he's been so standoffish, and two, that she has his attention After pretty much being ignored by the rest of the male suitors, Violet Bridgerton and Lady Danbury, they're looking at each other like, oh shit, our shit worked. They're thinking that their matchmaking that happened for, when they arranged that dinner is coming into play and working. And that's how episode 1 concludes. For me, this dance that the Duke and Daphne do at the end of episode 1 is one of my favorite dances. This is so sensual and slow, and the way he speaks to her, like, if this is to work, we must appear madly in love. And then it's just like so swoony with like the swell of the music and the fireworks going off and everybody looking at them. This first episode gets you hooked. You're like, okay, what's gonna happen next? It's a perfect pilot.
Hi guys, here's Nadhya with a quick caveat about the second part of episode 1 on our coverage of Bridgerton season 1. I had a little bit of audio trouble as we were recording, so I wanted you guys to know before you get into it. It's going to sound a little bit different. Definitely still intelligible, but sounds a little bit more like you're talking to me on the phone than listening to me on a fancy schmancy podcast. So if that's offensive to you, I'm so sorry. We fix it in the next episode. But yeah, just wanted to let you know. Thank you so much. Getting into episode 2, we're moving so fast, moving at a clip here. We open in flashback. So we're learning at the beginning of the episode about the backstory of the family Simon is from. So the Hastings family, right? The Duke and Duchess of Hastings. We're pretty much at like Simon's birth. And you learn pretty quickly that like his father's a piece of shit. All he wanted was an heir to his duchy, his dukedom, and his mother dies pretty much immediately after childbirth. Well, because it's the 1700s. That's why. That's enough of a reason. As we're kind of watching this part, we realize that Simon's history with Lady Danbury goes really far back, as in Lady Danbury was literally there when he was born and like held him as a newborn baby. So she's been in the shit. We also meet, one of the Duke's best friends, Will Mondrich. He's like a local boxer.
He's based on a real boxer.
Oh my God, is he really?
So Will Mondrich is actually based on an actual boxer of color at the time called Bill Richmond. He was born into slavery in New York, and he would fight in like taverns and shit. There was a British officer who literally bought his freedom and brought him to London in the 1770s. He boxed into his 40s, like, which is old for that time, I feel like. And so it's funny because Bill Richmond actually had a very similar relationship to the Duke and Mondrick. Like, there was a baron of the time that lived in London who he would train with, and they built like a well-known friendship at the time. So that friendship inspired this friendship between Mondrick and the Duke. I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool. I did not know that at all. And what a fucking backstory, Jesus. We realize that he's pretty close friends with Will Mondrich, in spite of their differences, obviously, like in class and where they live, in their lifestyles. Even though Will Mondrich is a prize fighter, he's married with children. So he's living a much different lifestyle than the rakish Duke of Hastings. As the episode moves on, we see that Daphne and the Duke's plan to fake date and attract suitors for Daphne's hand and keep the aggressive mamas away from the Duke of Hastings. Their plan is set in motion and kind of starts to work, right? Like, Daphne starts to seem more desirable. Everybody's kind of leaving the Duke alone because they think that he's serious about Daphne and that he's going to eventually propose. And throughout the episode, they attend like 2 balls and a picnic. One of the little threads of banter is that they keep going back and forth on how many obligations they have to do together in order to seem like they're courting just enough, but not too much. As we flash kind of back and forth between the Bridgertons and the Featheringtons, at the Featherington house, we notice that Marina's condition causes the 3 Featherington girls to wonder how she came to be pregnant and where babies come from. And this is how the show kind of sets up for the viewer, that these bitches know fucking nothing
about anything. They're taught that learning about sex is vulgar. They don't know how babies are made. They don't know why. Like, they don't understand any feelings that they may have or any lust that they may feel. They linger on it the perfect amount, because if they lingered on it anymore, I would explode into a ball of anger.
It's almost offensive.
Oh my God.
It's almost like they didn't think these tiny little brains can process this site, like couldn't process like life.
Like, as if they're not going to be the ones pushing babies out of their fucking bodies.
Quite literally, like they won't educate these females on the things that their bodies are literally required to do at ages of like 15 and 16 because they're marrying them young as well.
And when they already have their periods, it is like incredibly offensive. Their lack of knowledge is something that does come back in the plot several times.
What makes it more upsetting than anything else is that you come to realize that the boys that are relatively the same age, if not younger than some of our main characters, giggle at the fact that the girls don't know what they're talking about because the boys do know. They've been educated on the matters of sex. However, the females know nothing, quite literally, as the show will continue to show you, until the night before they're married, where their mother has to let them know, hey, so this thing's gonna happen later tonight, just to make you ready. And then that depends on like how well or not your mother's able to describe that to you the night before your wedding night. Like, it is terrible. It's infuriating for sure.
Even as I was watching this with my husband, because I'm doing the rewatch, my husband has kind of seen the show a little bit in passing, but he's never really sat down and watched it. He was like, wait, they don't know anything? And I was like, no, that's like the point.
Right. For them, you have to be married to have a baby. The married part comes first and then the baby comes later. That's how it works, right? First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes a baby and a baby carriage. There's even a song that says it. Hello.
Oh my God. You do learn that George Crane, the man who Marina's in love with, who gave her this baby, he is fighting in the Peninsular War, which is being fought in Spain. So they're sending letters back and forth, but they're taking a long time to arrive, literally because he's on the front lines, he's at war. So that is also something that will kind of come back and recur in the plot.
So as Daphne and Simon's plan is working so well, that afternoon, the Bridgerton house is completely filled with a bunch of gentlemen callers, just as Daphne wanted it to be. However, also arrives Anthony along with Berbrook, and they're both pissed, and Anthony kicks everyone out. Berbrook is very disappointed as he wore his satin knee breeches for the occasion, and he starts getting on Daphne and his mom about allowing the house to fill up with callers, supposedly knowing that he already promised Daphne to Berbrook, this fucking asshole. When Violet's insisting that no, the Duke is courting Daphne and they're seriously courting, and one of the things she says to him to convince him that he's a serious suitor is, hey, they've already danced a couple of dances at the ball. More than one. Hello, that's a big deal. Something that Anthony says that's a bit of foreshadowing is Colin has done the same with Penelope Featherington. It does not signify. And here we are opening up season 3 and it's about to fucking signify. Anyway, something that Violet says to Daphne when she's worried about all of this shit with Berbrook and Anthony is, listen, the more serious it'll get with you and the Duke, the more it'll show Berbrook that it's finito to turn around and go the other way, because he may not respect a woman's word, but he certainly will respect a man's word. And we see that shit taking place throughout this episode too, is one of the main themes. That evening, Simon and Daphne go to their ball together. This is the first ball they go to after the Vauxhall ball, where everybody saw them dancing for the first time. This is one of my favorite balls they attend because of their dancing sequence, which is so cute. They're just having fun. And they do this sequence to the Bridgerton score that plays in the beginning. Tom Verica pointed out that this is one of his favorite dance sequences of this season First of all, there's a little spin that the Duke does, was completely unscripted and not rehearsed. And it was left in because Verica saw it as like a moment where he was like letting loose and falling in love. So at this ball is when the Duke tells Anthony what he witnessed between Berbrook and Daphne. Something that made me semi-respect Anthony in this scene is that he didn't even question whether it happened. It's like once he heard Daphne punched Berbrook, he knew that it happened. Because even when you read the books, it's known that she can hold her own when it comes to the boys. She grew up around boys. So for her, that's one of the character traits that she has in the book. They don't talk about it as much in the series. And as soon as he found out that that shit went down between Daphne and Berbrook, he went up to Berbrook and he said, leave my sister alone unless you want to get punched by another Bridgerton in the face. Even though Anthony did that in defense of Daphne, she got upset with him and the Duke because of the way that they approached that situation. She knows that they're underestimating the lengths that this stupid little fucking entitled asshole Berbrook is willing to go to get what he wants. So they think they've squashed the situation, and it remains to be seen. Berbrook's petty ass ends up following the Duke into an alley and confronts him regarding Daphne. Something that he said that made me so angry, like just watching this, I had steam coming out of my ears, is he's confronting Simon about Daphne. And Simon pretty much just says, listen, I think it should be up to Miss Bridgerton whether you court her or don't. And his answer to that was, when I'm buying a horse, I do not negotiate with the horse. Bitch, quite literally comparing courting women to like buying livestock. And it is so satisfying when the Duke hears this and is like, you don't deserve to breathe the same air as her, knocks him the fuck out. You're almost afraid for Berbrook's life. The next day, everyone's at a picnic, and these people picnic in the most glamorous way. They got tents, tables, chairs. They moved their whole fucking house to this park to picnic. And then Berbrook shows up to the picnic, threatening the Bridgertons with spreading false rumors about Daphne if she doesn't marry him. Everyone knows that this would absolutely ruin her because nobody's going to believe her. They're going to believe his word because he's a man, he's a baron, outwardly has a good reputation. They're going to take his word, and it will absolutely ruin her reputation. Daphne, knowing that, figures that her only choice to not ruin not only her, because it's not just her who will be ruined, it'll be her whole family and the rest of her sisters as prospects. Daphne figures that her only choice will be to marry Berbrook. Later that evening, we see Eloise and Benedict sharing a smoke outside. Benedict catches her, but then ends up joining her. And they have a cute little sibling moment. Here you start seeing the chemistry between Eloise and Benedict. And they have a conversation about how they feel that they want a different life than what is expected of them. A sentiment that they share is, I am capable of something more. Violet gets an idea from having visited the Queen for tea and learning that Brimsley loves gossip and he loves spreading gossip. She gets the idea to invite Lady Berbrook to tea. And through gossip between the ladies' maid, they find some fishy shit about Berbrook. He has an illegitimate child that he has rejected. And the women decide they're going to gossip this through town until it gets to Lady Whistledown and she publishes it in her paper. And like clockwork, that shit worked before the end of the day. Berbrook was in the paper. Everybody in town knew about his dirty business. And he leaves town. Bye, bitch. See you. So this is an example of how women took their resources and we're like, we're going to fix this situation and this is how we're going to do it. And one of the things that I love that Violet says is, we're going to do what women do, and that's talk. They fucking figured it out. The men couldn't do it. And Anthony learned his lesson that sometimes women know best. And he admits that he'll handle matters differently in the future. Or not at all, says Violet. I am more than capable, Anthony.
Low key though, she spends season 1 emasculating him every chance she gets.
You know what, though? He deserves it because here's the wisdom. Here's the experience. Don't shut her down because she's a woman. Just because you're suddenly the man of the house, don't mean you know more.
Bueno, no es tan suddenly.
No es tan suddenly, pero ella tiene la experiencia también y todo.
Mm-hmm.
So that night, they're getting ready for yet another ball. Eloise goes to Daphne in a moment of kind of sisterhood, reaching out. We see Eloise a bit softer in this scene where she's expressing her relief about the Berberk situation. And she kind of opens up to Daphne and talks about her fears of marriage and having children. And she starts to recall her own mother's experience during what we find out is a complicated labor with Hyacinth. Daphne tries to reassure her and admits that she's also scared. She always tries to add like this positivity. Oh, but there's joy and light on the other end. And this is where Eloise, like, she does like the eye roll thing where she's like, oh.
I'm Eloise. Eloise is me. Daphne is Paola. Except for the fact that on the show they're not friends and in real life they're friends.
I mean, to me, I think it's just Daphne's just trying to like, this is a thing I got to do and I'm going to have to make the best of it. And she's trying to give it a positive spin. Yes, I'm scared, but it'll probably be worth it. It'll be great on the other end. Whatever she's got to tell herself to be able to cope with the shit she's dealing with. It's frustrating. If she felt she had a choice, this is not what she would be doing. Eloise, this is an eye roll for her, and she tells her like, it must be exhausting to pretend all the time. To her, she feels like you're just pretending like you like this. That must be exhausting. And I don't know if that was a dig on Daphne or if she was being genuine.
I think it's a little bit of both.
Like, how can you find this?
Like the fact that you even have the capacity to pretend that this is like something that you want. How? But at the same time, I feel bad for you because you're dealing with this right now and I'm not.
Yeah. It came off with a little shade.
It did. Yeah, Daphne's left a little speechless.
But I think that it adds to kind of the resolve she shows to the Duke later on that night while they're dancing. And she's like very determined. She speaks to him and says, this is about my life and I'm going to take charge of my life. And pretty much just tells him like, listen, you're on board or not. Say it right now because I'm serious. He actually meets her where she's at and is like, all right, well, if you want this to appear serious, you should call me Simon. He does the same to her. He calls her Daphne. Now, this is a big deal back then. You didn't call people by their given name unless you had good rapport with each other or you were family. It kind of takes her by surprise a little bit. I guess it felt a little weird. But we do see the chemistry heat up again in this part. Because right after this, they continue with their dance. And he slides his hand up her back. And she pulls away a bit because I think she feels like she needs to clarify. Hey, I want a husband and I want a family and children. Because based on what her mother said, those are the things that are going to make her happy. Mm-hmm. They finish this dance and the Duke continues to observe her as she walks away. I think this is where the viewer sees him and sees how he's looking at her. And you understand he's falling in love. And it's almost resentfully falling in love. Lady Danbury's with him in this scene and she asks him like, what's wrong? Like he seems so conflicted. Because I think he's seeing that he's falling in love with this girl. And I think he wants to be able to give her the things that she wants. And at the same time, he's recalling a promise that he made to his father. And they show this in a flashback where he promised his father he will never marry or never sire an heir. The Hastings bloodline will die with him because of how much he resents that man and resents everything that he put him through, literally just for the sake of having an heir. And this all happens to the tune of In My Blood by Shawn Mendes. Is very sweet. And that's how that episode closes out. So a little honorable mention from that episode is that in the books, Berberk ends up being Prudence's husband. None of this Berberk situation happens in the book. Berberk is kind of like a weird guy in the background who does try to court Daphne and gets a little aggressive with her, like after he's had too much to drink, and she does punch him in the face. That does happen, and Simon does help her out of that situation. That happens at the very beginning of The Duke and I. Once that's done, you don't hear about Berbrook again. You hear about him here and there, but you hear about him again in respect to the Featheringtons because he ends up marrying Prudence.
All right, friends, you have reached the end of our first batch of recaps of Bridgerton Season 1, comprising of episodes 1 and 2. We tried to keep it brief. We failed, per usual. We hope you stay with us as we continue to recap the rest of Bridgerton Season 1 and move along into Bridgerton Season 2, all in preparation for the premiere of Bridgerton Season 3. Stay with us. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, please leave a review anywhere you get your podcasts. Please find us on social media at Sisflix Podcast on Instagram, Sisflix Podcast on TikTok, and Facebook if you use that. And send us an email anytime at sisflixpodcast@gmail.com. If you have any movie requests or suggestions for stuff we can cover in the future. We hope that you enjoy our ongoing coverage of Bridgerton. And yeah, please give us your feedback anytime. We would love to hear your thoughts. Talk to you soon.